Nissan's R32 GTR has been an iconic vehicle all around the world, and we're here with one of the standouts from the SEMA show this year. This immaculate R32 GTR is an absolute work of art, and we're here with Josh from Driver Motorsports to find out a little bit more about it. So Josh, we're pretty used to seeing these vehicles on the streets in New Zealand. They're pretty common, not so much over here in the US, but they're growing in popularity. How hard is it to get hold of one for a start?
So for us, it's kind of a blessing. So working at Driver Motorsports, we are a Japanese importer, so that's what we primarily do. And it started as, importing GTRs as a sole standalone car. And as those cars got harder and harder to find and more expensive, we branched out and started seeking other JDM makes. So it's pretty nice working for a company that we can get them when we want them.
Perfect, because they're not getting any more common, that's for sure. Okay, let's start with the engine bay because that's an obvious standout with this vehicle. The RB26 base engine that came in the GTR is very well known and well respected, but it's also not short of its set of issues if you want to build a powerful and reliable one. So talk us through the build here. What did you start with in terms of a base engine block?
Okay, so we started with an RB30. We figured, hey, we want to go with a bigger displacement. We want to make some power, and we wanted to really, shore it up with some structure to make sure that it could actually take those kind of torque numbers that we were thinking about making. Obviously, there's a lot of parts that we could throw at it, and we were pretty keen to use the Nitto 3.2 stroker kit. We'd seen good results with those Nitto kits in the past, and we're like, you know what, we love this kit, we're going to use it. So that coupled with some, other goodies on the inside, we were like, hey, you know what, this is a winning combo, we're going to go with it.
Now, the RB30 block is obviously nothing particularly unusual in terms of hybrid RB builds. In stock form, it's a pretty ordinary engine and definitely not one that was ever designed with the intentions of making maybe 700, 800, 1,000 plus horsepower. No. So other than the stroker kit, the Nitto kit you mentioned, which is crankshaft, conrods, pistons, what other changes are necessary in the bottom end to keep a RB30 block alive at higher power?
Certainly. So we retained the all-wheel drive function in this. So we used a PRP block brace that obviously was machined with some precision care and took it to our machiner for the align honing and getting everything really dialed in for our bearing clearances that we liked. And again, that structural rigidity to keep the all-wheel drive, the extended oil sump to make sure that we have plenty of flow with all the Nitto pumps and goodies. Like really, we think we addressed all of the shortfalls that the 26 would have.
Okay, so that's really in terms of tying the bottom end together. So it's an adapter plate that adapts to the four-wheel drive sump, correct?
Correct, and we're also using the one that integrates the main caps, so it's not...
That's the other part, the integration with the main caps, basically tying that whole bottom end together and preventing everything moving. That's the important part. Now, you just mentioned oil control briefly there with an extended sump, and this is another area where the RB has... Let's be honest, it's fair share of issues. So you're still wet sump on this, I take it?
Still wet sump. We weren't really sure if we were going to go with a complete different change in kit, but it is something that we're going to look to do in the future. But this was primarily built as a street car, so we weren't trying to get full race on it and kind of stay within the owner's budget, even though we spent a considerable amount of time and money on this thing.
No doubt. I mean, obviously, if the car's a track-based car with high lateral and longitudinal G-force, dry sump is kind of a no-brainer. But as you mentioned, for a street car, a properly designed wet sump works really well. The factory oil pumps on the RBs are well known to shatter if you go above about 8,000 RPM. So that Nitto oil pump is a factory replacement that gets around that problem?
It does, absolutely. So we are pretty happy using those pumps, even on standard 26 builds, and we look to move to like the sine drive or some of the more intricate collars to get rid of those Series 1 crank issues that people are kind of plagued with. And then on top of that, we'll make sure and try to build to a high vibration standard to keep those things from breaking themselves apart.
Just diving back into that a little bit, you mentioned the problems with the first generation RB26 crankshaft, and that's because it doesn't have full engagement in the factory oil pump, which is obviously a source of failure. When you go to the billet crank from Nitto, though, no longer a problem with that anyway.
No longer an issue with that. So it's definitely a nice piece, and we swear by it. It's one of the most common things that we do with our upgrades in the RB26 platform.
Now, the oil control, just staying on this for a moment, one of the problems is the pump, and obviously we've talked about an extended sump to get more oil capacity in there. One of the problems with the high revving nature of the RB engines, though, is sustained high RPM pumps a lot of oil up into the cylinder head. Doesn't necessarily do a great job of getting that back into the sump, so you can literally run the sump dry. How are you dealing with that particular issue?
So in most of the cases with those, we'll put the restrictors in the head to kind of slow that flow down, and then we're also running the Nitto the head return, so everything that runs back to the sump gets everything is flowed back down as quickly as possible.
So those restrictors basically reduce the volume of oil flowing up to the head because it is a mechanical lifter arrangement, so you don't need high oil flow, and then the external oil drain from the head back to the sump to help get that oil back where it should be.
Absolutely, yeah. That's kind of a go-to. I think a lot of people are running those, and if they don't, they'll find out why pretty quickly, I think. So.
In terms of the RB30, another element with that block, particularly in these R32 chassis where they're a little bit smaller, is that they are a taller block. Are there any sort of problems around fitment with the engine with that taller block?
Absolutely. So with the 26 head being placed on, it does raise the engine up quite a bit with that taller deck, and we've addressed that by using a roughly 7 mil spacer that we got from Platinum Racing Products, and that brings that whole subframe down, and now it solves our problem. So other than that, really hood choice is going to be the other thing with our mechanical fuel pump, making sure that we don't have any clearance issues there. But
we'll come back to that mechanical fuel pump as we go further through this sort of tech discussion, tech tour. And one of the elements I just want to focus on is how much easier it is now to build a car like this. And I'm not taking away from the effort that's gone into it, right. But the products like you mentioned there, the off-the-shelf sump plates, the off-the-shelf spacers for the subframes. I mean, years ago when people started modifying these, unfortunately we didn't have access to those components. So definitely a lot easier. Now the bottom end really, it's there to generate capacity and hold the power, but the head is really the key for airflow in and out and the key to making that power. So talk us through the head package on this.
Okay, so this one is a standard RB26 head that we did a full pocket port and did a lot of metal work in there to keep the flow as tight as we could get it. It's got all Supertech valve train with the heaviest springs we could get our hands on, all titanium retainers and such. The cams are billet GSCs and 286 on both sides, and again we're running Kelfer cam gears to give us some adjustability as far as dialing in that torque range where we want it.
Okay, so we can't really talk about the head without sort of considering the flow, which is the turbocharger as well. So what is the turbo that you're using?
So we got a Precision, and I think it's a 7685 is what we're running on the back of there. And we've seen those turbos make in excess of 1,000 horsepower, and we felt like that was going to be the combo that would work the best for us. So.
And what sort of power band in terms of RPM usability range were you aiming for?
So we think the head's built to take a considerable amount of revs, but we want to kind of limit it to 8,500, 9,000 to keep her in a safe range. We know that power is going to kind of fall off on that big end, but with the amount of flow and torque that this thing makes down low, we're expecting, with our pump gas tune right now, we're around the neighborhood of 650 horsepower, and then with E85 we're up around 1,100, and then it's on a nitrous kit, so we're looking at 1,400 total horsepower.
Let's talk about boost levels to get those two power levels for pump gas and E85. What are you using?
So we initially started, we were in the 15 to 18 horsepower range to get some good power on the pump gas.
For 15 to 18 PSI range?
Correct, yeah. I know you guys do the KPA, and it always messes me up when I'm looking at that stuff. And then we're looking, high 20s to even 30 pounds to get it up to, more power than that. But definitely on the corn. So we got some more tuning work to do. We had to kind of cut our tuning short. We didn't get to do our flat shifting. Some of our gear didn't come in time. It arrived in Virginia today. So we're going to get her back home and we'll do the full tilt tune and make that big number. So we don't intend for it to be a dyno queen. We intend for this thing to be legitimately all show and all go and make it work.
Ideal. One of the issues with the electronics side of the RB engines, and this actually goes for a lot of the Nissan range of engines, is the trigger inputs to the ECU. These are really problematic. These engines in stock form use a 360-degree optical sensor that's mounted off the camshaft, and without going too far into it, is really problematic, particularly when we start modifying the engine with more aggressive cams, heavier duty valve springs, etc. And that can cause all sorts of tunability issues to the point where the engine essentially can't run. What has been your solution to that specific problem?
When I first started tuning the RB platform, I never really understood like the whole belt stretch and the way that optical sensor would kind of like back and forth move and cause all kind of issues. But again, I wasn't building cars that were making excess of 500 horsepower, so it was kind of nominal. But once we started making cars that were making excess of 500 wheel horsepower, we knew like, hey, we got to solve this trigger issue, and PRP has been our solution to that. So we're using, their street kit on this car, and working with Herman over at PRP, he's been a legend as far as sending us the stuff that we need or the support that we need to get these cars set up. So that's the win for us, is the electronic trigger kit through PRP.
So safe to assume that that's converting it to a crank trigger where the engine speed signal is coming directly from the nose of the crankshaft?
Correct. And then we're using the single tooth home up on the cam to kind of reset that cycle.
Now that synchronization or home input in Haltech speak is required there to actually let the ECU know which engine cycle it's on, which is critical for direct spark as well as sequential fuel injection. So that's why we see that there is still a pickup on the front of the exhaust camshaft there. Looking at the front of the engine, you've also got the mechanical pump that you alluded to there. And we see this really commonly used in high output drag cars. What was your driver there to go to that mechanical pump rather than some of the bigger ethanol capable electric pumps?
So at first we were going to go all electric, and then we realized that with the Nexus system that we were utilizing so many channels, we almost maxed the thing out, and we're going to need to add an additional PDM to add more electrical pumps. So we felt like using the OE position lift pump to the surge, an external tank to get us to the mechanical would solve a lot of our issues. So doing lots of homework and research and checking out what you guys are doing, we figured out, hey, this is going to be the best potent combo to make power and it keep fuel pressure at the rail under hard launch.
Sure. I mean, a lot of drag cars we see run just the mechanical pump, but some of these pumps, and it's very hard to make a blanket statement, certainly not all of them, can struggle at cranking speed to actually generate enough pressure to actually supply the fuel into the engine. So the electric pump to lift the fuel to the mechanical pump, I assume that's how you're getting around that problem?
That's correct. So yeah, we're going from the main intake pump to the surge, and then that external pump to keep the mechanical full. And we're using a dash 20 solid metal line down the entire length of the car to kind of almost make like that surge tank up forward, because we didn't have the engine bay room to really put a surge in the engine bay and it look aesthetically pleasing. Yeah.
Now, the mounting of that is quite interesting. You've got the mechanical pump driven off the front of the intake cam, and as I understand it, talking off camera, this is a product that Driver Motorsports is making as well. This is a one of one so far?
Correct, yeah. So there's lots of things on this car. The turbo manifold itself is completely made in-house. There's a lot of very unique things that Devin, our master fabricator, threw his brain to. And when we started looking at buying off-the-shelf parts, they didn't fit with some of the theme that we were going with. So Dan, our sales manager, is a CAD wizard, and he kind of created a mock-up design, and we had it locally cut and machined down. And when we put it on, it hit all the wickets. We knew that this is something that we were going to look to market. But again, there's not many people that are after something like this. So at this present time, it is a one of one, but certainly available if somebody wants it.
Fine, fair enough too. Let's talk about the rest of the drivetrain. If you're sort of aiming for 1,000 plus horsepower, the stock 32 box might not last too long. So what have you got going on there?
So we've got a Hollinger sequential 6-speed in this with a Driveshaft Pro single-piece driveline, and then Driveshaft Shop 2,000 horsepower axles, and then roughly 2,000 horsepower three-piece clutch to really hold all that down. So we think we nailed it down.
In terms of that Hollinger, it's quite nice because for a very long time Hollinger actually have been making a specific 6-speed sequential version of their box that bolts up to the existing Nissan transfer case, which is the key to retaining the four-wheel drive, correct?
Correct. So previous R32s that we built, we did a Samsonite sequential, which we really, really loved, but there was a lot of extra machining required to make that work in a four-wheel drive configuration that wasn't outside of our capability, but it definitely was something we weren't really ready for when that first came to our shop. With this one, because it uses a lot of the OE Nissan stuff, it blew our mind that it was so user-friendly in installation, and that the hardest thing we had was determining what shift knob to run.
It's a huge problem. In terms of the four-wheel drive transfer case, this is again quite unique in the R32 or the Nissan GTR world, in the way that works with the sort of the hydraulic linkage or clutch, I guess you call it. Are you using the factory Atessa system for controlling it, or are you doing anything specific there with the four-wheel drive control?
So it does maintain all-wheel drive capability, but we're using the Nexus. I developed our own like torque split, so to speak, where it's push on, push off. So it will drive like a normal, 3.2 GTR where it's rear wheel biased, and then when you decide you need that all-wheel drive, it will not automatically send power to the front. You have to initiate it, in which case, so if you know you're in drag mode and you want to launch, you turn it on, and then I have it set in the Nexus so that, after a certain wheel speed, it will turn itself off and be rear wheel only. So essentially only used for the hard launch, and everything else is rear wheel only.
And that's something we're seeing a lot of those who are dedicated to drag racing this platform doing something similar, albeit potentially in different ways. We'll talk just a little bit about the electronics. You've mentioned a couple of times now the Nexus R5. So this is quite unique in terms of ECUs. Can you tell us about its capabilities?
So we weren't sure what we were getting ourselves into with this. This is the first car that we built with the Nexus platform. And as PDM started to come out and we were learning a lot about solid state relays and such, we were like, hey, look, this thing's awesome. It's the cutting edge from Haltech. We want to give it a go. We were very intrigued at the idea that everything on this car works with no relays, no fuses, no nothing for that matter. So as we built this car, everything from the electric AC, the electric power steering, the turn signals, the headlights, like all of it runs through the Nexus. We were blown away at its capabilities.
So that also allows you, when you're building a car with a high level of attention to detail for the show element, to strip away all of the ugly factory fuse boxes, etc., relays, and really start from scratch with a hidden harness?
That's correct. So again, throwing the shout out to you guys, we did the wiring fundamentals course and a lot of the training for there. It's all mil-spec concentric twisted wiring, and it's all done to a bulkhead connector, and everything is just as tidy and tight as it can possibly go. And we absolutely love it. I think Devin, again, our fabricator, spent about a week laying out and itemizing where everything was going to go, and I oversaw that project because it was something that I'd done previous. It was his first time, and it came out flawless. Like, we couldn't be happier with the way that worked out.
No, perfect. I'm glad the courses were helpful to you there as well. Relatively fresh build. What's next in the future for it? Is there any finishing touches required, or is it just a case of kicking back and enjoying it?
So we want to kick back and enjoy it, but we're definitely not done. There's still some more things that we want to tidy up. So Brad, Rival 32 is the owner of this car, and he wanted to take possession of it. This is the first time he's seen it in 3 years since we began this build. So his unveil was very emotional. We were very excited about that, but we had some high power tuning left to do and some things that we wanted to tidy up before he takes full possession. And he's from the Utah area, so the elevation is much different. So we want to get it dialed in and get it up to him where he can have a local tuner kind of recalibrate for some of that elevation change and send it on its full run. So he does intend on roll racing this car. So
it should be pretty potent. Yeah. Look, Josh, it's been great to get a little bit more background on the car. It really is a credit to you and everyone else that has been involved with it. So thanks for taking some time to chat to us about it.
Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, the team at Driver Motorsports, like, bunch of great guys. We're more friends than we are a bunch of coworkers. So it's nice to be able to go to a place, put our collective thoughts together to make something like this, and get to represent here at SEMA.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.